Hey, this is Adam Torres, and I'm here to tell you that it has never been easier to start your very own podcast. At Mission Matters, our goal is to amplify stories that matter. That means we want to help you start your podcast because your story matters. We can do this in 3 different ways. 1, join our podcast school and take a free or paid course. 2, visit our resources page where we've already figured out what you need, such as where to host your podcast. Or 3, heck, we can even do everything for you through our podcast agency, including editing for cheaper than you can do in-house. Oh, and no contract, service is month to month. Get started by heading over to missionmatters.com and click on Start a Podcast. All right, now let's get into the show. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres. Keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Rob Kowalski on the line, and he's CEO and founder over at CityFam and also author of Why Waiting Works, How Fast Sex Prevents Us from Finding True Love and Long-Term Happiness. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate you having me on.
So excited to get into this book today. So for my audience that's been with me for a long time, you know I love talking about books, and you know I love helping authors sell books. So this is going to be exciting. I want to get into this, Rob. But before we do talk about your book, I do want to go a little bit further into what you're doing over at CityFam. Tell us a little bit more about this organization, please.
Sure. Yeah, the mission of CityFam is, changing lives through the power of community. And it really stemmed from when I was making positive changes in my life. Was coming out of the club scene, the bars and the clubs and everything that went along with that. And I was, starting to make better choices. I actually was going to church on Sunday and really, volunteering heavily. But pretty much every weekend I was sitting around by myself with nothing to do and no one to deal with. I thought that my new friends were very nice, but they were also kind of boring. They weren't doing much. And after a while, I social isolating, actually several years, I ended up going back to some of my bad behavior just because I was looking for something to do. And it seemed like the bars were the only place where there was something going on the weekends, So I, after kind of in a mess and then rededicating a few years later to the narrow path, I guess you might say, I went through the exact same thing where I was renting movies every night in my house, wondering, like, what am I supposed to do now? I know, I was also, I'm a fundamentalist when it comes to my faith. So I was limited in, I didn't want to go to the bar. I didn't want to have a girl over my house because I knew we'd end up having sex, and that was always my kryptonite. And I was just like, how do you even do this? So I started organizing social events, really to give myself something to do on the weekend, something to look forward to. I also had some friends that were making good decisions that were going through the same thing. So they started coming to the events. And then what was interesting was I had a lot of friends from my old life that I had been really trying to help for several years. And they wouldn't come to the places. I couldn't get them to recovery. I couldn't get them to go to church or whatever it was that they needed. But I could get them to a social environment because they like to have fun. And when they got to the social environment and they met my friends that were healthy, I saw positive change happen in their life. So we started organizing service events, and everything just kind of accelerated to the point where the group got big enough that we had to give it a name. We call it CityFam. We really believe it has the power to make, big changes in the world, because I see a lot of people that struggle with whatever their thing is, specifically substances, toxic relationships, things like that. A lot of times they go back to those things because they're bored, they're lonely, and it's really hard to do it alone. So if you can give people healthy community, teach them how to be in relationship with each other in healthy ways and make it fun, man, that you could change the world. And that's what we're trying to do.
Man, that's such an exciting story, and I love it. And I think it's a great transition, too. So let's just dive right into this book. So Why Waiting Works, How Fast Sex Prevents Us from Finding True Love and Long-Term Happiness. So you gave us some of your background, but, taking this story and creating this book is a little bit different. Like, what was the inspiration for going this far with it? Because I love the message. I love what you're doing. But to create a book, we know that's not easy. So what was the inspiration here?
Yeah, so I used to be a stripper and a nightclub promoter, so I've had a ton of casual sex. I've always liked to put that up front. So I'm not saying, making these claims from somebody that's never done it. I've lived on both ends of the spectrum. I probably have lived at more polar ends of the spectrum when it comes to sex than any human being in the history of the world. I'm not even joking when I say that. I've had, sex with hundreds of women, and then I've been abstinent for 15 of the last 20 years. So when you live at those ends of the spectrum, it gives you a very unique perspective on the subject. So when I started off on this way of life, I really only, I only started abstaining from sex because I was meant to be obedient, to my Christianity when I became a Christian. And I also thought that God would give me a wife if I stayed out of trouble. Selfishly, I believe that, okay, if you don't sin long enough, he'll give you a wife. And I'd never been in love, so I wanted that. So but I had no understanding of why it made sense, the practicality behind it at all. I even questioned God. I was like, why is this wrong? It's just two consenting adults making each other feel good. But over time, I really started to understand it to the point where I feel like I can probably explain it better than anyone. And, if you just look at the numbers, this is where I always like to start with people. Okay, so the reason I wrote the book, let me answer your question before I go down that path. The reason I wrote the book was because I wanted people to understand it, because I feel like people are more prone to do something that they understand. I heard people in church when I was a kid tell me not to have sex, and I was not about to listen to them because they couldn't tell me why. Just them telling me it was a sin was not enough for me to not do it. So because I've started to grasp it, and I started to see, wow, this was the result of a lot of the problems in my life. I became passionate about explaining it to people, regardless of if they're, people of faith or not, because even people of faith, for the most part, aren't abstaining because they don't understand it. So I really became passionate about explaining it to people in a practical way. That's why I wrote the book, mostly. But if you wanted me to take it a step further, just to start off on the practicality of it, people that marry as virgins have a 6% divorce rate. People that marry that don't wait have a 50% divorce rate, which is crazy because you think, your chances of getting a divorce if you're not waiting to have sex until marriage, it's 1 out of 2. And then the thing that I always follow it up with and say is, of the 50% that don't get divorced, what percentage of them are happy? Because I don't think it's that high, which tells me that, and it should tell everyone that your chance of being happily married, if you don't wait until marriage to have sex, it's slim. The odds are completely stacked against you. Not a good proposition. So you have to be smart. You have to understand that, you probably are going to be a statistic. If you do what everyone else does, you're probably going to get what everybody else has got, which means you'll probably be divorced or you'll be unhappily married.
No, it's great. And I love that I love the way the book is also laid out. So we're not going to have time for the audience, everybody listening, we're not going to have time to go through all this book. But that being said, I definitely want you to go. It was easy to find on Amazon. I found it really easy. And you're going to see in the show notes, there'll be notes on it too. So really easy to find. But I do want to pick out one particular thing. And I know we're kind of skipping to the end on this one. But I want the audience to get the rest of the book so that they get the groundwork that it's going to take, because I like the way you laid this out. But one chapter that I do want to just have you comment on is really what it means to set yourself up for success. So chapter 10, give us a little bit of a flavor for that chapter.
Sure. And I would love for people to pick up the book, because the book really does a good job of convincing you that this is the right way. So before, setting yourself up for success, first you need to make sure that you identify success, because for a long time, to me, success was getting laid. It was not waiting. Now it's the opposite. But in order to be successful on this journey, number one, you have to have great boundaries, because it's so hard to do. So that means, for me, not spending time alone with females because of my past. It's just too easy to go back to that bad behavior. That's like muscle memory almost. But having accountability, surrounding yourself with a good community of people that can hold you accountable and support you, and honestly just give you things to do on Friday and Saturday besides the wrong thing, which is kind of, again, where City Fam comes in. We do a good job of making the journey as enjoyable as possible. I often compare it to a wagon train. Years ago when people wanted to cross the country, they didn't try to go alone. They went in these wagon trains because it was safer, because, you could get attacked by Indians or snakes or whatever. That's what City Fam is. I believe that every person that exists, you know, they start off in one place and they want to go to their promised land. They want to go to this better place of purpose where they're walking in their purpose and their full potential. But you can't get there alone. You know, you have to go with a group of people, or else you'll get hung up with whatever addiction, substances, or bad relationship or whatever, because you just can't go alone because it's too lonely. So that's really what CityFam does for people. It helps them make that journey and makes it about as fun as it can be.
Man, that's awesome, Rob. So that being said, final question. Number one, if somebody is listening to this right now and they want to pick up the book, of course, and also they just want to connect with your brand overall and CityFam, and they're listening to this and they want to learn some more. I mean, what's the best way for people to connect?
I appreciate you asking. I'm actually giving the book away right now at whywaitingworks.net. They just have to pay for shipping and handling, but they get about $130 worth of free bonuses with it. If they wanted to know more information about CityFam, they could actually go to cityfam.com. It's FAM as in Mary.com, and they could opt in and join the fam. There's some other links there where they can request more information. And then if they just want to connect with me, it's Rob B. Kowalski is my username on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And that's also my website, robbkowalski.com.
Fantastic. Well, Rob, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about your background and also your book. So great stuff there. Want all my audience, definitely head over to Amazon. It was so easy to find. Just put in Robert Kowalski, comes right up. Also, there'll be some info of that on the show notes, so you can be able to find this book really easy. I definitely recommend that. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time with us, definitely hit that subscribe button. Love to have you come back and listen some more. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Business, definitely give us a subscribe there, but leave us some comments in the video. Love to continue the conversation over in the YouTube community. And Rob, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, Adam.